off camera, you had mentioned a few more things, and I thought it would be a really great opportunity to go into this specific topic. But somebody was asking about deep underground military bases and if they exist and what you have seen in your experiences being in these programs. And you had alluded a little bit to it last time, but I know that there's a little bit of a deeper story to this that you've experienced, and I'd love for people on the other side to hear it because it's not something that we're exposed to, not being in here. And there's so many of these unknown horrific things that are going on behind the scenes that us, the public, are not made aware of. So I'm going to turn it over to you to maybe explain your own experiences with this and what you want people to know about DUMBs and deep underground military bases.
Absolutely. So first of all, one of the most beneficial things people can do is research for themselves, first and foremost, above anything else, because someone else just sharing the information for you, that's like coming in one ear and very easy to go out the other. However, if you do some diligence on your own work with some of the tidbits of information, I'm going to just cover this entire podcast with all kinds of little pearls, all kinds of little threads for you to all go pull on and go do your own investigatory work. Deep underground military bases have their roots from antiquity. People have been literally finding ways to dig in and fortify themselves and survive conflicts. Okay. The big issue in the United States that made them a little bit distinct and different was the threat of nuclear war. When the threat of nuclear war became a reality, people no longer used the same fortification styles that used to exist pre Nagasaki. You know, that once people began to turn cities to glass, it turned into an entirely different event. And so what happened here in the United States as a protective measure in order to ensure the survivability of the country was something that was established called the continuity of government, the COG. So the continuity of government was established in the 1940s and 50s and ongoingly. And the investments that began to pour into that industry are tremendous. And this is what continuity of government is that they needed a way to make sure that people have a form of leadership in place that does not get interrupted in the event of total nuclear war. If every military base, all of the political, judicial centers, all of the governing authority structure that exists on the surface of the earth gets completely neutralized in a massive nuclear strike, they needed a way of being able to still run the country and predominantly the military in the event of that Third World War. So the way they did that is they began to dig into the earth and began to excavate massive tunnel systems and begin to build cities underneath our feet, cities of infrastructure, cities of every complexity and level of society that exists up here on the surface. They began to replicate down beneath their feet. And that was so that they could have a state government ready to operate instantly so that there wasn't a delay of service. Like when you're sitting there waiting for your cell phone to connect to the call and then it says it's looking for a signal. They didn't want any of that. They needed to be able to launch retaliatory strikes and be able to command everyone from those deep underground military bases. And this is what began to give birth in places like Virginia, West Virginia, and the major hubs of it happened along the East Coast. However, a lot of that began to get relocated towards the central part of the country where I grew up there in Denver, Colorado, and the surrounding area, Colorado Springs specifically. That was when I was about 12 years old. My family moved from the mountains of Arizona, Pinetop, Show Low Lakeside, this tiny little town with a huge 5A school where all kinds of bizarre freak show stuff was going on. But when I finally got up to Colorado Springs and Denver, Colorado, you guys are like the central hub of the capital of the United States. And I know that's perplexing considering that we all look at the District of Columbia and all the corporation of the United States is centered there. However, the actual continuity of government's capital is the central of the United States, and that's what Denver is. This is why Denver, Colorado has had so much technology and so many of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense, into all these alphabet soup agencies have relocated their predominant headquarters to that region. And a lot of that really got burgeoned into existence in the early 2000s and post the kind of recession timeframe. That was a lot of the stimulus packages that Colorado boosted up. But one of the most famous deep underground military bases in all of society today is what's called Fort hold on, let me just show it up. Cheyenne Mountain here is the Air Force Base. I'm going to share screen so you guys can just check this out because this will help you have a better idea of what's going on here. So this is Cheyenne Mountain. Now, Cheyenne Mountain is a deep underground military base that's literally the entire, just outside of Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is the second largest city in Colorado. And there, if you're just sitting downtown, you can look out at the front range of Colorado. Colorado is basically Kansas on one side, and then it's split right in the middle by the Rocky Mountains. They extend for thousands of miles in north and south of there. But right there is where everybody lives. The vast majority of the population centers are right there centered along that front foothills just in front of these massive 14,000 30,000-foot mountains. Cheyenne Mountain is one of these massive granite mountains, decomposing granite and what's called Pikes Peak granite. And so granite is incredibly strong. It allows you to be able to put up a very strong defensive system for nuclear attacks. So Cheyenne Mountain was one of these first cities that was built underground. And I know a lot of times they're only going to show you, this is one of the entrances to one of the doors. That is a blast door. What you're looking at there is that entire door is designed to seal off this entire compartment of this building so that there can be this continuity of government for what's called NORAD. NORAD is the central hub of all things Space Command. Today we'd be talking about Space Force, this new wing of the United States military. Before that, everything was just junctured under the United States Air Force. And what they did is they built this center to be able to control and communicate with everybody out there, in specifics, the air assets. So anything from a tiny little rock that's flying around, basically bigger than a meter, anything that's about this big or bigger, they can track it and have been tracking it everywhere in the entire world simultaneously. All of that information gets fed into one centralized location there in Cheyenne Mountain. That is the place from which this war was inevitably planned to be fought. The entire building rests on springs. Let's see if I have that picture of that. But basically, this is a different one over there in Hawaii. This is another deep underground military base entrance. And so you'll see these hallmarked into specific types of geology. They're looking for specific kinds of stone to be able to burrow into that's more conducive for it. This is out here in Missouri. This is near a place called Carthage, Missouri. And these are civilian accessible. Whereas where I come from in Colorado, all this was military centered. Out in the Ozarks, which is another central ridge that's lifted up. It's called the Ozark Plateau. Another geological feature when there's this giant plains of Kansas and Nebraska, Iowa, all of these giant plains. Well, then the Ozark Plateau lifts up, and the limestone, the dolomite, the karst topography, which is very similar to what they had in Vietnam that was so conducive for building tunnels, is very conducive for building these deep underground military bases. There's a very public one that you can watch people going in and out of, which is called Springfield Underground, which is a 3 million square foot underground city. This is where many of the headquarters for places like Kraft and a lot of these food distributors have underground storage, and they live there. People work there, they go underground, and they live their entire day-to-day lives down under these little places. But this is a tunnel boring machine that was used by the United States Air Force in order to construct these massive tunnels systems that you can see. These are kind of the modern public version of it. In the 1950s, they began to patent and start utilizing nuclear fusion, a form of just rock, melting the rock face itself so that you could create a liquid channel of rock and then harden it. So then you didn't have to reinforce it with concrete. You didn't have to put in any reinforcements. You could literally just liquefy the rock. And this is what enabled them to start doing that. Entire little ports and cities, like there's these tunnels that operate from the Pacific coast out near the Seattle, Washington area that go all the way inland into Iowa or into Idaho and northern Idaho. And this is where a lot of our submarine bases and deep underground military bases that facilitate the Navy side of things operate. But NORAD specifically, the entire bunker system for this whole little underground city sits on springs. And this was designed so that during the 1950s, it could survive a direct hit from a nuclear weapon by Russia. Now, my experiences was right there through Cheyenne Mountain. And so there's a guy named by my military handler at the time when I got brought up here to start working with the United States Air Force. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Lonnie Weaver, and he was a commander here at NORAD. And so he was someone who oversaw a lot of these underground projects. And the reason that so much of this occult and special access projects begin to move down beneath ground is because it allows for a level of secrecy and control when you're the guy who gets to know where people are going in and out. If you can control these single doors going in and out, you can make sure that nobody's coming into these places readily without massive oversight. These are all just different facilities that you guys can see. And here's another one. This is the NSA's one in Hawaii. This is places like Edward Snowden. You guys are familiar with the guy who brought out a lot of these leaks and brought this stuff forward. He was working in one of those deep underground military bases. Hawaii, I did an interview that is called Reptilians, Military Secrets, and Hawaii's Hidden History. And I did that with some folks called Hebrew Hawaii. And they are there on Oahu, and they were sharing a lot of the secrets about the military bases that are out there. There's more deep underground military bases on Hawaii than almost anywhere else in the entire United States because it is a central hub for the military. This is another one that's a Lockheed range, an underground entrance there at the end of a runway, which allows aircraft, experimental X-class projects to be able to land and be able to go underground without being readily seen. Here's another one that's been utilized, a little more derelict, older stuff. But a lot of this infrastructure you guys got built and put into place in the 1950s. So when you go into these, it literally is just, it looks like you're going into another industrial building. The military builds things to last for a long time, and so there's linoleum floors, and it just looks like you're in a regular hallway with UV with the just regular lights. It's not anything that looks like exciting. It's not sexy at all. There's nothing to be noted. There's nothing wonderful to be noticed. You can't a lot of times tell you're actually in an underground facility, because a lot of the entrances for this, you're going to be entering into a regular above ground building, and then you're going to be progressively working your way down below ground. And so it allows them a level of secrecy. Like these are ones that what it looks like more above the United States Air Force Academy. There's a road up there that's called Rampart Range Road, which is a public access road. But on the other side of that is that entire mountainside is the United States Air Force Academy property. And they have entrances just like this, which are concealed into the granite faces of it. And so these are the ones that you start to get access into these kinds of rooms. This is what is really the underground projects teams. So when I started working inside of these facilities, my entire life got turned upside down, because I began to see a world that is completely contrary to the system of what we have when it comes to technology and when it comes to like how the world actually functions and operates. So we shared a little bit more of that in the last episode that Emma and I did, involving things like Neptunium, superconductors, magnetic levitation trains. There's a way of moving and transporting people around and goods around that's completely different than what we had. And the reason that we don't have maglev trains, the reason we don't have high-speed trains and rail cars up here on the surface, is because they don't want anybody to have access to that except for who they say they can, because it transforms a society when you're able to move things with limitless without need for power. When you don't need the same power systems that you have, it allows those control mechanisms to begin to break down that old world society, the petrochemical based industry that is so benefited financial kingdoms like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and a lot of these societies that were established, and they are fueling this system. The petrochemical basis for our society is what has enabled so much of these overarching power controllers to rule up here. But down beneath the ground, it's a completely different currency that's under there. And the currency that's down there is truly secrecy. And so they enforce these secrets explicitly. And so when I got brought down into there, I got to see that really it's an inverse kingdom of power. And the only way that you get in and out of that kingdom is through secrets. And so if you're able to traffic in those secrets effectively, you can broach your way into there. However, more often than not, getting out of there requires you to create what's called dead man switches. I wrote a blog post a few years ago because some people tried to kill me when my wife was 7 months pregnant with my last daughter. And I really thought that was the end of it. And I wasn't going to get to hear Jubilee or anything she ever had to say. And so after that, I wrote this blog post because it was like, game on, like screw this. Some of you guys have secrets like this that could buy your way out of the underworld. Some of you gals have access to these secrets. And I'm just going to tell you right now, the best thing you can do with that is broadcast them consistently, broadly, as fast as you can, as readily as you can. And I understand some of you want to keep your insurance policies and keep them buried away for another time, and you share out your insurance policies with other people in case you get killed or injured. However, best thing you can do with the secrets is to utilize them effectively to be able to get your way out of that system. And that was one of the ways that started getting me out of there, is that I stopped working with them to keep their secrets, and I started wanting to find a way to weaponize their secrets against them so that people could get set free from the system instead of being trapped in it the rest of their life.
Wow, thank you so much for that. This is a topic I think we've all, to some degree, maybe seen a photo, but there's so many questions around, what's true? Do they actually exist? What goes on down there? And you had mentioned the reptilian aspect. What are your thoughts on